Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 16th installment of the live stream. I'm really thrilled to have my good friend, Mr. Michael Kaykov, back for the second time, our first repeat performer.
Yeah, it's really a pleasure to be here, and hopefully we're going to have a lot more of these. It's, at this time, people really have to take the initiative to do something like this, because it's all about streaming now, and
Yeah.
we're no longer relying on the bigger corporations to do it.
Yeah.
And luckily we have platforms like Facebook, YouTube, and others. Who is sponsoring this, by the way?
Yeah, this is I'm working with some really great friends in Ottawa in Canada, in a wonderful organization called Pop Drone that I actually became affiliated with. I guess it would be maybe 6 or 7 years ago at this point. And they started as a record label and as a music blog, and we became friends through some mutual friends from school, and we've been doing all sorts of things since then. So they've been really helping me out a lot with putting this together in terms of the graphics and all of that stuff. It's been really, really awesome.
Thanks
so
to them, yes.
Yeah, huge
Yes.
thank you to them. Specifically my friend Gregory Clark. He's the guy that sort of is really the brain behind all of this. So he's really been a huge help for this. So huge thanks to him. And it's really great to have you back. The last time you were here, we talked a lot about Scriabin.
Oh, yes.
And our shared admiration for him. And I'm really glad that you're back today to perform music of Liszt, who is another one of my favorite musicians and just pianists through history. So those of you that aren't musicians or haven't heard of Franz Liszt before, I think it's pretty safe to say that he's generally regarded as maybe the greatest pianist of all time. Certainly one of them at the very top. And he's tremendously respected not only as a pianist but also as a composer, as an intellectual. And he lived a really long life, sort of an uncharacteristically long life, especially for the time that he was active. And so because of that, we have just sort of tons of material, and you can just really see his development and his thought processes in pianism over his life. So
Yes, and Liszt also invented the solo recital as
That's
a
right.
genre, the solo piano recital. And he was also one of the first transcribers to take things that are really composed for other mediums or perhaps other settings, such as Schubert songs,
yes.
and to really bring them into the concert song. So out of the music parlor or private homes into the concert hall.
That's right.
Yes.
And one of the interesting things about it, I actually tell my students this a lot of times, those that are studying classical music at least, that really before Liszt, it was pretty strange to hear someone perform music that they didn't write or that they weren't improvising. Like you said, Liszt was really sort of one of the first people to popularize playing music by other people and in sort of a recital, quoted, like where you're literally reciting or recreating music from the past to be enjoyed at that moment. And it's something that sort of happens all the time now, so I think we kind of take it for granted.
Yes,
But
certainly.
before that time, it was my understanding that most people were usually improvising or they were playing music that they composed. And so it's really kind of spectacular to think that this guy really was the first person to popularize something that we as pianists just do all the time now and don't really think about.
Oh, yes, and he was also one of the first to really put Scarlatti on the concert programs.
Really?
Yes, he was one of the first. He was doing a lot of Scarlatti.
Wow.
A lot of Hummel,
Yeah.
especially in the early concert programs when he was 11.
I see.
Yes, he sight read the Chopin etudes.
Let's actually delve a little bit into Liszt, because there's a lot of anecdotes about him. One of that being one of them, of him sight reading the Chopin etudes. Apparently, he also sight read the Grieg concerto. And
Yes,
by
and
all accounts,
yes.
it was pretty much flawless. Do you believe those things? I have my own opinion about it, but I'm kind of curious.
I believe it because we have the testimony of his students.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at someone like Maurizio Rosenthal, for example, who was a really fine pianist, kind of in the salon tradition, he would have these wonderful Strauss paraphrases, and he would play with a really light, lilting touch, kind of like, that's something that you refer to as a salon tradition. It wasn't really, it's sort of lighter in character and more free.
Yes.
And even he said that when he became Liszt student, he was really shocked that at the things that Liszt could do at sight. And one thing that really stood out was he was amazed by Liszt's variety of tone color, that he didn't know there's so many different shades of pianissimo. And this was when Liszt was in his 70s.
Yes.
Way past his supposed prime.
Mm-hmm.
And another story he tells is someone asked Liszt to play the Earl Koenig transcription when
Sure.
Liszt was an old man. So Liszt said okay, and he went to practice octaves on a dummy keyboard
Yes.
for like 30 minutes. Then he came back and played it. You can find the anecdote somewhere. But supposedly Liszt could just, because his genius was so great, he could devote much of his practice time that was limited to mechanical exercises to stay in shape. He would have a dummy keyboard, he would practice trills,
Yes.
octaves, other things, and then just have the full technique at his disposal to play anything he could imagine or read, which
Yeah.
was pretty much anything.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned that because for the record, I actually believe many of those stories as well.
Yes.
And the reason that I believe them is because Liszt has actually this massive volume of technical exercises that are kind of like what you described. And for those of you that that don't know much about Liszt, you may have heard some of his etudes, like the concert etudes, and they're beautiful music. They're very, very difficult. But this is something else. These are this volume of exercises is not meant to be performed. They're not really music. They're just mechanical exercises, and it's 2 volumes. Have you seen these?
I've seen. Yeah, it's published
like
by.
each one is like this
yes.
thick. They're
Published
massive.
by the Budapest edition, I'm sure. Yes.
That's right.
I never
And-
played them myself, but I've seen them. Yeah.
Yeah, and I looked through many of them. I mean, the amount of material is staggering, but it seems that from what I looked through, it's kind of like he was almost approaching the piano from a completionist standpoint. He's like, I'm just going to do every possible movement in every possible way that can be done at the piano, and then just call upon it.
That's
whenever,
correct. Yeah, in his youth, if you look at some of his letters,
Yeah.
he said he practiced every scale with the fingering of every other scale. So
Whoa.
he would invent fingerings. One of his innovations was playing the scale with fingers 1 through 5, like. So you have
Yes.
for 2 octave scales, like in a blur, and he actually practiced all the non-standard scales with standard fingerings and vice versa.
Yes, that's incredible, really, and I think that actually explains how he would be able to do a lot of the things that it's said that he did. Sight reading Chopin etudes, sight reading the Grieg concerto. Something like the Schubert. That kind of makes sense, where he's looking at it almost from like a mechanical machine-like perspective, at least
Yes.
physically.
Yes, well, the step 1 would be just to realize the notes in your head and really hear it, which is not many people can just look at a complex score and hear every detail right away.
Yes.
That's step 1. Well, it's hard to understand how the mind of a genius works,
Very true.
right? We can't equate it to like modern. We can't equate it to ordinary people and how their mind would process it. We also talked about, before we started this broadcast, Joseph Hoffman and Saint-Saens would pull tricks like hearing a piece once and then repeat them from memory right away.
Yes.
And Glazunov also was capable of that.
Wow.
Yes.
It's interesting because the other thing about Liszt that amazes me is not only did he have this incredible pianistic command, but he also was sort of in a class of his own as a creator of music, not just as a performer. So, he had this incredible career and almost sort of, he was really kind of a rock star from what I understand, at least, that time period's version of what a pop star would be.
Yes, in terms of box office gross and even sheet music sales. I mean,
Yeah.
the Grand Gala Chromatique, I'm sure it was the equivalent of something like a Lady Gaga cover today.
Yeah.
The sheet music of that. It was really literally sold out every single year after 1838.
That's amazing.
People were clamoring for this sheet music.
Mm-hmm. And he was sort of in a class of his own in both of those categories, and so it's it kind of brings me to the program that you're playing today, because you're doing the second Mephisto Waltz, the Lugubre Gondola No. 2, and then also this transcription of Saint-Saens, the Dance of Death.
Yes.
And I feel like each of those three pieces that you've chosen, all great pieces, by the way, they highlight different aspects of his creativity. So maybe you can talk a little bit about those pieces and your relationship with them and how you chose them.
Yes, well, these pieces are part of a larger CD project that I'm doing. I'm recording sometime in April or May. I'm going to record Liszt's Mephisto Waltz No. 1 and 2, and also a piece that Liszt composed to go along with the first Mephisto Waltz called Der Nächtliche Zug, a 13-minute piece composed for orchestra, but he also composed a piano version of it. I'm doing both the Lugubre Gondolas and Weinen Klagen Zorgen Sagen, and the last one is the second Mephisto Waltz, which was written 22 years after the first.
Wow.
Yes.
So let me ask you this. So for those of you that don't know, to my knowledge, Liszt wrote 4 of these Mephisto
He wrote 4.
waltzes?
I believe Leslie Howard completed the 4th one. I know that there were 2 versions of number 4. One of them was complete,
Yes.
and Leslie Howard also found some scraps and decided to make another version of it, somewhat closer to Liszt's conception. I'm not sure exactly what it is the truth, but there is a 4th one, certainly.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so I actually didn't realize that there was such a large gap in time between the first 2, because, you know, the first is the most famous, I think.
Yeah, that one is
that's
around
the
late 1850s, early 1860s. It's hard to put an exact date on it.
Mm-hmm.
And the interesting thing about the Mephisto waltzes, especially number 1 and number 2, is Liszt composed versions for orchestra and for piano almost simultaneously. In the case of the second Mephisto Waltz, he actually composed piano 4 hands, I believe, or either piano 4 hands or 2 pianos. I'm not sure. There is a distinction. Solo piano and orchestra at the same time. So Liszt also, he would treat the piano a lot of the time as an orchestral instrument. So a lot of his works translated very well into 4-hand arrangements and also into actual orchestral scores, such as the case of the Mephisto Waltz and Der Nächtliche Zug.
Yes. You know, that's actually, that's kind of interesting that you mentioned that. I actually wasn't aware that I knew that there was an orchestral version, but I didn't know that he was doing them at the same time.
Yes, it's hard to say which one was first. I believe he wrote them out at the same time and just sent them to the publisher. The Lugubre Gondola 2, first of all, this piece was always referred to in old concert programs as Lugubre Gondola. There wasn't number 1. Number 1 was discovered, I believe, in the 1970s.
Yes.
But this is the number 2. It's a long, extended version. One of the first pianists to play it was actually Sviatoslav Richter in the 1950s, and that was just on the program. It's Lugubre Gondola.
Yes. And what does that mean for our
It's the mourning gondola.
Yes.
So it's a mournful piece, and he has versions of this for, I believe, string trio and piano. I have to look the exact instrumentation up, but it's for strings and piano, definitely.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yes.
And so that's kind of very characteristic of Liszt to have multiple versions of one piece, you know, the things that are, you know, written for piano, for orchestra, and then other instruments with the same music. And then the last piece, the Saint-Saens, the Dance of Death. What's the story with that as far as...
It's an interesting story because the music for this came out before Saint-Saens published the full score of his orchestral version.
I didn't...
The Liszt transcription of this came out before that.
Wow. So how did he even get his hands?
I suppose he sight read the thing, and this is an interesting transcription. I believe that when pianists look at perhaps writing their own transcription, this is a good model to study. It's fascinating. First of all, it's not literal in any sense of the word. Liszt expands it by a considerable amount. And also when looking at this, if you compare it with the orchestral version, a lot of the piano textures are very free. So he's just taking the main thematic elements and he's putting them in various registers, inversions, and things like that. It's not literal.
Yes.
And it's very important if you ever work on your own transcriptions, you will see very quickly that things that work in an orchestra, especially with strings and wind instruments that have a prolonged tone, suddenly they don't work anymore at the piano.
They don't.
at all. They're just going to sound like a bad piano arrangement.
Yes.
So Liszt just has incredible freedom in it, and it sort of, in a way, it's more faithful to the original than writing something that's no perfect and an exact copy.
That's right.
You see, it's a paradox.
Yeah, it is a bit strange. For those of you that are thinking about this, the process of transcription is quite simple. It means that you're taking music that was written for one instrument or group of instruments and arranging it in such a way that it can be performed on a different instrument or group of instruments.
Yes,
and that can
correct.
be really, really useful. I mean, especially if you're taking something, that involves a lot of performers, like a symphony where you might have many, many people performing, and then you transcribe it for the piano, then obviously that piece can get a lot more exposure. It's much easier to get one person to play on the piano than to put an entire orchestra together. So, musicians have various motivations for, why they may choose to transcribe something. Sometimes it may be as simple as, I've done this before. I like a piece and it's not written for the piano, and so I just transcribe it for the piano so that I can play it. Sometimes it's something like that. There could be numerous reasons why you would do that. But I really like what you said, that, Liszt, at least from what I've seen, is one of the kind of guys that can really capture a piece's voice on the piano. Like, no matter what instrument or instruments it was written for, he knows just what to do to translate that onto the piano in a way that makes sense. So that's why I was kind of curious, how it is that he would have transcribed this piece by Saint-Saens, The Dance of Death,
Yes.
for the piano without the music being published yet. Yes.
So he heard it, and then he, went home and.
And so he ended up releasing his own transcription before.
That's correct. Yeah. Yes.
That's hilarious. And
Yes.
so let me ask you this, because I'm actually not sure about this. What was the nature of the relationship between Liszt and Saint-Saens? Because I know Saint-Saens was much younger, I would imagine.
I'm not sure. The only anecdote I know about Saint-Saens and Liszt off the top of my head is once Liszt claimed, it was at a party or something like that, and he played a very difficult work.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure by which composer, and he said something to the effect of, there's only a handful of pianists right now that can do it. So Saint-Saens, after just hearing it, went to the piano and played it as well. He just played it back right away after hearing Liszt do it once.
Wow.
So then Liszt got up and said, okay, there's two of us in the room right now. Yes.
Oh, that's amazing.
There's recordings of Saint-Saens playing the piano, and they're staggering.
Yeah.
They're absolutely incredible.
He was also a phenomenal organist. Saint-Saens was. He was an incredible pianist, incredible organist. And we were actually joking about this before. As a pianist and as a keyboardist, he's held in the highest esteem. But somehow, as a composer, like in circles of composers, people that write music, Saint-Saens is literally the butt of every joke as a composer. I kind of know why that is, but honestly, those of you that don't know much about Saint-Saens, maybe you've read this. He wrote this really scathing letter about Debussy's music, about him as a composer and about him as a person.
I have not heard of that. No.
It's pretty insulting stuff. Like, I mean, he pretty much stops short of just calling Debussy a degenerate, and basically says that the things that he's doing in music are destroying music.
And this was for which? Was it a review of a particular work of Debussy?
I don't think so. But now I have to read it again myself. Now that you mention it, I think he might have been intimating that he was talking about Prelude to the Afternoon of the Faun, and
that
basically, and sort of describing how the things that Debussy did in that piece were atrocities, which is not true, for the record. I mean, Debussy is phenomenal, one of my favorite musicians ever.
One of the first pieces of music with a sort of non-functional harmony.
That's right.
Unless I'm wrong, it's
And
something like
you're very
he uses
right
the
about
same
that.
kind of chords, but he really started using
Yes.
the sixth chord really not as an inversion, but as an add-on, as a pure sound.
That's right.
It's really one of the innovations of that work.
From what I've read about Debussy, not to digress too much, but he sort of said that his only focus was just sonority. Like, he's like, I like this, it sounds beautiful, so I'm doing it, regardless of what rules I may be destroying or breaking. And I think Saint-Saens took offense to that, and so wrote these horrible insults. And so, for some reason, I think the entire music composition community has now decided that Saint-Saens should be subjected to a similar treatment. But this piece, the Dance of Death, that Liszt arranged, I mean, it's a really phenomenal. I actually like the original piece, and I like the piano transcription even more. So I'm really thrilled that you're playing it. So tell us quickly about when in Liszt's life were each of these things done? Because as I mentioned, he lived a long time.
The Mephisto Waltz and the Lugubre Gondola, that's 1880s.
Okay. Oh,
And
so towards the end.
Towards the end, yeah. I believe 1882 or 1882, 1881.
And he's
You have to
born
look up
in
the exact-
1811. Yeah,
yes.
1811.
And the Saint-Saens transcription is 1870s. I
Okay.
want to say 1874, but I'm not sure. I know it's 1870s for sure. So it's actually at the time when Liszt's music was not particularly virtuosic.
Yes.
And these pieces are actually totally go against that, because the second Mephisto Waltz is absolutely crazy.
Yes, it is.
And the Danse Macabre is insane as well.
Yes. Wow, that's
Yes.
fantastic. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing you play all of these things. And, please keep me informed of when the total recording project is, completed
Yes.
and available, and how we can find it and listen
Certainly.
to it. But I'm really, it's really a privilege to sort of get a sneak peek into your preparation for this and just, really listen to it as you're preparing to
That's right.
to make it permanent.
It's always a snapshot of you on a particular day. There's no such thing as a finished picture anyway.
Yeah.
Even with the studio recording, you can listen to it, and you may not agree with what you did back then. It's
Yeah.
only a snapshot.
Very true. So, it's a privilege to hear this particular snapshot.
Thank you.
And those of you that are watching, the program is in the description, so you can see the names and the categorization of the pieces. It's all there. So we're going to turn the floor over to you, good
you.
maestro, and I'm going to get you set up with a camera angle, and just bear
Yes.
with us for just a second, and we'll get started.
Thank you, Jeremy. I appreciate being here, and hope
Yeah.
you guys enjoy the music. Thank you.
Absolutely. Bravo, my friend. That was absolutely fantastic. That was absolutely fantastic.
Thank you for all the listeners.
Yes, that was really, really wonderful. And thank you for coming and doing this. Thank you for letting us take a glimpse into your process of getting ready to undertake this massive project. And thank you, of course, all of you for listening. And of course, another huge thank you to Pop Drone for helping to make this possible and helping us to organize all the things that we have to do to make this run smoothly. Those of you that are interested in hearing more music like this, please stop by the Patreon site. You can just look for JeremyaJanijordan on Patreon, and you can find an archive of all of the concerts that we've been doing here for the last 4 months. You can find the quality's a little bit better there, so you can really enjoy it, higher frame rates and such. And also, if you've really enjoyed what you've heard, please donate to Michael. Please show your support for what he's done and the tremendous achievement that you've shown us here today. So there's a Venmo link in the corner. Like I said, you can visit Patreon to hear this concert again and all of the other concerts that we've done. Next week, my really great friend Mark Dover is coming. We're going to play some music together. A fantastic clarinetist from the quintet, the Imani Winds. So we're going to play some original music and also some covers. So it's going to be a wonderful, wonderful time. So thank you again to all of you. Thank you to Michael. And take care. We'll see you soon.